The wine glass slipped from Emma's fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. Tiny shards glittered like broken promises under the kitchen's soft light. She stared at her phone, the text message glaring back at her with cruel finality. I miss you. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. L. Her heart thudded, each beat echoing in her ears. A wave of nausea rolled through her, sending her stumbling back against the counter for support. The message wasn't meant for her, but the sender was unmistakable. Daniel, her husband of 15 years. Emma's vision blurred as she scrolled. Through his phone, which he had carelessly left on the kitchen island while he showered. There were more messages. Some were flirtatious, others explicit. A whole world she never knew existed, unfolding right there in front of her. She fought to breathe, her chest tightening. This couldn't be real. Not Daniel. Not the man who held her when her father died, who whispered promises of forever under the stars on their honeymoon. Not the man she trusted with her heart, her soul, their children. The water stopped running. Upstairs, panic surged, and she dropped the phone as if it burned her. It clattered against the floor, but she didn't care. Her feet moved on their own, carrying her out of the kitchen, through the living room, and out into the cold evening air. The chill bit into her skin, grounding her. She wrapped her arms around herself, the world spinning. She heard the shower. Door open, heard his voice calling her name. It sounded distant, foreign. How many times had he called her name with that same tenderness? How many of those were lies? Her phone vibrated in her pocket, snapping her back to the moment. She pulled it out, half expecting another message from L, but it was her sister, Mia. Hey, did you talk to Daniel about the anniversary party? Can't believe it's been 15 years. You guys are couple goals. Emma felt her legs give out, collapsing onto the porch steps. 15 years. 15 years of love, laughter, trust. How long had it all been a lie? Chapter 2. Shattered Illusions. When she walked back inside, Daniel was waiting in the kitchen, a concerned look on his face. His damp hair was tousled, and he wore the blue sweater she bought him last Christmas. The sight made her stomach turn. Em, are you okay? You looked pale earlier. Did something happen? His voice was laced with worry, but all she heard was deception. She swallowed, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Could he see her brokenness? Did he know that she knew? She wanted to scream, to throw the evidence at his face, to demand answers. But all she managed was, I need some air. His eyes softened, his expression gentle. You've been working too hard. Maybe we should take that trip you always wanted. Just the two of us. Get away for a bit. Her breath hitched. A getaway, like the ones he must have taken with his lover. She almost laughed at the audacity of it, the cruel irony. She turned away before he could see the tears welling up. I'm just tired. I'll be fine. She heard the tremor in her voice and prayed he didn't notice. But he did. He stepped closer, his arms circling her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. I love you, Em. You know that, right? His voice was warm, sincere. She froze, the weight of his words crushing her. How many times had he said that to her while texting his lover? How easily could he lie? Her jaw clenched, and she forced herself to nod. Yeah, I know. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Chapter 3. Fractured Truth's days passed, and Emma became an actress in her own life. She laughed at his jokes, smiled at his touch, played the part of the loving wife. All the while, her heart shattered into pieces she feared could never be mended. She started her own investigation, combing through his emails, checking his calendar, tracking his movements. It didn't take long to find the truth. Her husband was having an affair with Lauren Pierce, a colleague from his office. They had been together for over a year. A year. 12 months of lies, of betrayal. She couldn't breathe, the walls closing in around her. But she refused to break. Not yet. She needed to confront him, to hear his confession. The confrontation came on a Friday night. She sat at the dining table, her fingers curled around the stem of a wine glass, her gaze cold and unyielding. When Daniel walked in, his smile faltered. "What's wrong?" He set his briefcase down, concern flashing in his eyes. "You're scaring me." Her voice was hollow, emotionless. "Who is Lauren Pierce?" His face went pale, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The silence was damning. "I saw the messages," she continued, her voice unwavering. "I know everything." His shoulders sagged, his head dropping as the truth settled between them. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." She laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "You never meant to hurt me? You lied to me for over a year, Daniel." The days stretched into weeks, an agonizing limbo of broken trust and unanswered questions. Daniel moved into the guest room at Emma's insistence, his absence from their bed a constant reminder of his betrayal. They coexisted in the same house, exchanging only necessary words, careful to keep up appearances for the sake of their children. To them, nothing had changed. But to Emma, everything had. She moved through the motions of her life, school drop-offs, grocery runs, dinner preparations, all while suffocating beneath the weight of his lies. The nights were the hardest. Lying alone in the bed they once shared, she replayed every memory, every conversation, scrutinizing them for clues she might have missed. How long had he been deceiving her? How many times had he kissed her goodnight with the taste of another woman on his lips? One evening, unable to bear the silence, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at her phone. Her fingers trembled as she typed the message. "I know everything. How long?" It took all her strength to hit send. The reply came almost instantly. "Emma, I never meant for you to find out. Please, can we talk?" Lauren Pierce. The woman who had invaded her marriage, stolen her husband's heart. Emma's blood boiled. She wanted to scream, to break something, to hurt her the way she was hurting, but she refused to give Lauren that satisfaction. "How long?" she repeated, her grip tightening on the phone. This time, the answer was slower, more hesitant. 14 months. 14 months, over a year of lies, of stolen moments, of Daniel living a double life. Emma's vision blurred, the room spinning. She had been a fool, so hopelessly in love and trusting that she never saw the signs. Why? There was a long pause before the reply came. "I never meant to fall for him. It just happened." The words were like knives slicing through her heart. It just happened. As if her world was collateral damage in some careless mistake. She didn't respond. She didn't trust herself to. Instead, she deleted the conversation and threw her phone across the room, watching it crash against the wall. Chapter 5. The Confrontation. The next morning, Daniel found her in the kitchen, staring at the shards of her phone on the floor. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his shoulders sagging with guilt and remorse. "Emma, we need to talk." His voice was raw, pleading. She looked up, her expression cold. "I spoke to her." He flinched, his face paling. You talked to Lauren? I wanted to know how long you've been lying to me. She told me everything." Her voice wavered, but she refused to cry. Not again. Daniel sank into the chair across from her, his head in his hands. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," she whispered, her chest tightening. You destroyed everything." He looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "I was selfish. I was stupid. I got caught up in something. Something I thought didn't mean anything, but it did. And now I've lost you." His words hung in the air, heavy with regret. For a moment she saw the man she fell in love with, the man who made her laugh, who held her through her darkest days. But that man was a stranger now, tainted by his betrayal. Why? Her voice cracked, the pain seeping through. Why wasn't I enough? His face crumbled, tears streaming down his cheeks. It wasn't about you. It was never about you. I was lost. I was unhappy and I didn't know how to fix it. I took the easy way out. I was weak and I ruined everything. She looked at him, her heart breaking all over again. She wanted to believe him, to forgive him, to pretend it was all just a bad dream. But she couldn't. The wounds were too deep, the betrayal too raw. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Daniel. I don't know if I even want to." His shoulders shook as he sobbed, his pain mirroring hers. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll go to counseling. I'll quit my job. I'll never see her again. Just, please. Don't leave me. Don't take the kids. Don't take my family away." His desperation cut through her anger, softening her resolve, but forgiveness felt impossible. She stood, her voice hollow. "I need space. I need time to figure out what I want. Until then, stay away from me." She left him there, broken and weeping, a reflection of her own shattered heart. Chapter 6. The decision weeks turned into months. Emma tried to rebuild her life, focusing on her children, her career, herself. She went to therapy, talking through the pain, the anger, the confusion. She tried to understand how the man she loved could betray her so deeply. Daniel kept his promises. He moved into the guest room, quit his job, cut off all contact with Lauren. He became a more present father, more attentive, more remorseful. He begged for another chance, swearing he would never betray her again. But trust was fragile, and hers was shattered. She watched him constantly, second-guessed every word, every action. The weeks dragged on, a slow, agonizing march through uncertainty. Emma's life was a fragile balancing act, teetering between forgiveness and resentment. Every time she looked at Daniel, she saw both the man she loved and the man who had broken her heart. Her therapist, Dr. Calloway, had urged her to confront her feelings head-on, to stop avoiding the pain. But how could she when every memory was tainted by his betrayal? One afternoon, as the rain tapped against the window, she sat across from Dr. Calloway, her arms wrapped around herself. "I keep asking myself why. Why wasn't I enough? Why did he need her?" Dr. Calloway leaned forward, her eyes gentle. "Infidelity is rarely about the betrayed partner. It's about the betrayer's own struggles. His choices reflect his failings, not yours." Emma shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "I thought we were happy. I thought he loved me." Love and betrayal can coexist, as painful as that is to accept. The question is whether you can live with that contradiction, whether you want to try to rebuild or walk away. Emma stared at her hands, her wedding ring glinting under the dim light. "I don't know if I can ever trust him again." "Then maybe it's time to ask him the hard questions," Dr. Calloway suggested. "Find out if he's willing to do the work to rebuild that trust." Chapter 8. Beneath the Surface. That evening, Emma sat across from Daniel at the dining table, the air thick with tension. The kids were asleep, the house silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. "I need to understand," she began, her voice wavering. "Why her? Why did you turn to her instead of me?" Daniel looked down at his hands, shame washing over his face. I was weak. I was unhappy, and I didn't know how to talk to you about it. She was there. She listened. She made me feel important when I felt invisible. Invisible? Emma's chest tightened. I was right here, Daniel. I was your wife. Why didn't you talk to me? He looked up, his eyes red and swollen. I was afraid of disappointing you, of admitting that I felt lost, that somewhere along the way I forgot who I was. His confession was raw, vulnerable, a glimpse into the man beneath the lies, but it didn't erase the betrayal, didn't heal the wounds he'd left behind. I loved you, she whispered, her voice cracking. I trusted you with everything. How could you destroy that? His shoulders sagged, his face crumpling. I hate myself for it. If I could take it all back, I would, but I can't. All I can do is try to make it right. If you'll let me, she looked at him, searching his face for the man she once knew. Could she ever forgive him? Could they rebuild from the ashes? I don't know, she admitted, her heart breaking all over again. I don't know if I can ever look at you without seeing her. Daniel's face fell, his hope flickering. I'll do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, whatever you need. I can't lose you. I can't lose us. Emma's chest tightened, the weight of his words crushing her. She wanted to believe him, wanted to find a way back to the life they once had. But the fear of getting hurt again was paralyzing. I need time, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I need time to figure out if I can live with this. With you. Daniel nodded, his face twisted in pain. I'll wait, no matter how long it takes. She stood, her legs trembling. I'm going to stay with my sister for a while. I need space. His face crumpled, but he didn't argue. I understand. Emma turned away, her heart shattering as she walked out the door. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Not yet. Chapter 9. A web of lies staying at her sister Rachel's house offered Emma temporary relief from the constant reminders of her broken marriage. But the distance didn't ease the pain. If anything, it magnified her doubts, her fears. One evening, Rachel sat beside her on the couch, handing her a mug of hot tea. I know it feels like the end of the world right now, but whatever you decide, I'm here for you. Emma stared into the steaming mug, her voice hollow. I don't even know who he is anymore. I keep wondering how many other lies he's told me. Rachel hesitated, her expression shifting. Have you considered digging deeper? Maybe there's more you don't know. A chill ran down Emma's spine. What do you mean? People who cheat? They lie about everything. If he was hiding an affair for over a year, who knows what else he's been hiding? The thought haunted Emma, igniting a spark of paranoia she couldn't extinguish. What if there was more to Daniel's betrayal? What if his affair with Lauren was just the tip of the iceberg? That night, after Rachel went to bed, Emma sat alone with her laptop, her hands trembling. She pulled up their bank statements, combing through every expense, every withdrawal. She needed to know the truth, the whole truth. She was halfway through the statements when she found it. A series of payments she didn't recognize, all made to a private investigator. The drive back to their house felt surreal, the familiar streets now alien, tainted by suspicion. Emma's hands tightened around the steering wheel, her heart pounding. She had rehearsed the conversation 100 times in her head, but nothing could prepare her for the reality of facing Daniel. She let herself in quietly, the house still and silent. Daniel was in his office, hunched over his laptop, his face illuminated by the screen's pale glow. He looked up as she entered, his eyes widening. Emma, I didn't know you were coming back today. She crossed her arms, her voice cold. I needed answers. He shut the laptop, his expression guarded. I told you I'd answer any questions you had. I want to make this right. Then tell me about the private investigator. His face paled, his eyes flicking away. What? What are you talking about? Don't lie to me, Daniel. I saw the bank statements. You've been paying a PI. Who were you spying on? He opened his mouth, then closed it, his shoulders sagging. It wasn't what you think. Emma's voice shook with anger. After everything, you're still lying to me? He stood, his hands raised in surrender. I'm not lying. I didn't want to hurt you more than I already have. Hurt? Me? She laughed bitterly. You had an affair for over a year. What could possibly be worse than that? Daniel hesitated, his face twisted with guilt. I was trying to protect you from my father. Emma's anger faltered. Your father? He nodded, his jaw clenched. He's been pressuring me for months. He wants me to sell the company, to hand over control. When I refused, he threatened to ruin me, to ruin us. She stared at him, her anger giving way to confusion. What does that have to do with a private investigator? I hired the PI to dig into his finances, to find leverage. He's not the man he pretends to be. He's involved in some shady business deals, and I needed proof to keep him from destroying everything I've built. Emma's head spun, the room tilting. You're telling me this now? After everything? I didn't want to drag you into it. And then, after what I did with Lauren, I didn't know how to tell you. I thought you'd leave me if you found out how messed up things really were. She felt sick, the walls closing in around her. So you lied again. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I was trying to protect you, but I see now that all I did was push you away. Emma shook her head, her chest aching. You don't get it, do you? The lies are worse than the truth. If you had just told me, maybe we could have faced it together. But you chose to do it alone. You chose to betray me. He took a step closer, his face pleading. I don't want to lose you, Emma. I don't want to lose our family. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the broken man beneath the lies. She wanted to believe him, wanted to find a way back to the life they once had, but the weight of his betrayal was suffocating. I don't know if I can forgive you, she whispered, her voice cracking. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again. Daniel's face fell, his hope shattering. Please, just give me a chance. One more chance to prove that I can be the man you deserve. Emma felt her heart breaking all over again. She wanted to believe him, wanted to hope. But hope felt like a dangerous lie. I need time, she said, her voice hollow. I need to figure out if I can live with this, if I can live with you. Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. I'll wait. I'll wait as long as it takes. She turned away, her vision blurred by tears. I'm staying at Rachel's for a while. I can't be here right now. Daniel's shoulders sagged, but he didn't argue. I understand. As she walked out the door, she felt a crushing sense of loss. She had always thought love would be enough to get them through anything. But love couldn't erase the lies, and as she drove away, she wondered if she would ever be able to forgive him, or if the damage was too deep to repair. Chapter 11. Breaking Point. The days blurred together, an endless cycle of pain and doubt. Emma tried to distract herself with work, with helping Rachel around the house, but nothing dulled the ache inside. Her. She couldn't stop thinking about Daniel's lies, about his father's threats. Was it true? Or was this just another manipulation? A way to shift the blame and avoid responsibility? She needed answers, and she knew there was only one way to get them. That evening, she stood outside Harold's office, her heart racing. She hadn't seen her father-in-law since the affair was exposed, Hadn't spoken to him since the rumors about Daniel's downfall began swirling. She took a deep breath and walked inside, her heels echoing against the marble floor. The receptionist recognized her immediately, waving her through. "Mr. Morgan is in his office. He'll be glad to see you." Emma doubted that, but she needed the truth, no matter how painful. The air was heavy as Emma walked back into her house. She hadn't planned on coming back so soon, but after what she learned from Harold, she needed to see Daniel, needed to look him in the eye and find out if he knew. Daniel stood in the kitchen, nursing a glass of whiskey, his shoulders tense. He turned as she entered, his face lighting up with hope before faltering at the coldness in her eyes. "Emma, you came back." She didn't respond, her footsteps echoing as she approached him. "I went to see your father." His face fell, his body stiffening. "Why would you do that?" "I needed to hear the truth from him. I needed to understand why he's so determined to destroy you." Daniel's shoulders slumped, his gaze dropping to the floor. "So, now you know." "I know he's been blackmailing you. I know he orchestrated everything, including your affair with Lauren." Her voice broke, bitterness coating each word. Daniel's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. "What are you talking about?" "He set you up, Daniel. He threw Lauren at you to distract you while he dismantled everything you built." Her voice shook with rage. "He admitted it. He's been playing you like a puppet this entire time." Daniel staggered back, his face pale. "No, that can't be. Lauren and we met by chance. It was an illusion," Emma cut in, her eyes blazing. "He manipulated both of you. He knew you were vulnerable, that our marriage was struggling. He exploited it, and you fell for it. You betrayed me, and you didn't even see his strings." Daniel sank into a chair, his face crumbling. "I was so stupid, so blind. I thought I was in control. I thought I was escaping his grip, but he was holding the leash the whole time." Emma's anger wavered, her heart aching at the sight of him so broken, but she couldn't let herself soften. Not yet. "You had a choice, Daniel. You chose to betray me. You chose to lie." He looked up, tears glistening in his eyes. "I was weak. I was scared. I thought you didn't love me anymore. I was drowning, and she was an escape. But it was all a lie." Emma's chest tightened, her own tears threatening to spill. "You destroyed us for an illusion. I know, and I'll never forgive myself for that." He stood, his eyes locked on hers. "But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right if you'll let me. I can't change the past, but I want to fight for our future. For you." She turned away, her shoulders trembling. "I don't know if I can believe you. I don't know if I can trust you again." Daniel's voice broke. "Then let me earn it. One day at a time. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please don't give up on us." Emma closed her eyes, her heart torn. She wanted to believe him, wanted to find a way back, but the scars ran deep, and she didn't know if they could ever heal. Without another word, she walked upstairs, leaving Daniel alone in the darkness. Chapter 13. The decision days passed in a haze. Emma stayed with Rachel, trying to piece together her shattered life. She felt like she was suffocating under the weight of betrayal, anger, and confusion. Rachel's voice broke through her thoughts one evening. "You're torturing yourself, Em. You need to decide. Are you going to fight for your marriage, or are you going to walk away?" Emma looked up, her eyes hollow. "I don't know. I feel so lost. Everything I thought was real turned out to be a lie." Rachel squeezed her hand. "Maybe, but maybe it wasn't all a lie. Maybe there's still something worth saving." Emma's heart twisted. She thought of the good times, of the laughter, the love, the life they built. Was it all tainted now? Or could they rebuild from the ashes? That night, she lay awake, her mind racing. She thought about Daniel's broken expression, his desperate plea for another chance. She thought about Harold's cold, calculated cruelty, and she thought about herself, the woman she was before all of this. The woman she wanted to be again. She realized she had a choice. She could let the betrayal define her, let it destroy everything, or she could take back control of her life, of her heart. The next morning, she packed her things and went home. Chapter 14. A new beginning. Daniel looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief as Emma walked through the door. You came back. She set her suitcase down, her face unreadable. I came back to talk, to see if there's anything left worth saving. His shoulders sagged with relief, tears shining in his eyes. I'll do whatever it takes. I swear, I'll never lie to you again. Emma held up a hand, stopping him. I need you to understand something. If we're going to try and fix this, it won't be easy. It won't be quick. And it won't be like it was before. I know, he whispered. I'll earn your trust one day at a time, however long it takes. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man she once loved. And the man who shattered her heart. Could she love him again? Could she forgive? I don't know if I can ever forget what you did. Weeks turned into months, and Emma and Daniel navigated the delicate dance of rebuilding their marriage. They went to therapy, shared awkward dinners, and tiptoed around each other's pain, learning to speak truths that had long been buried. But beneath the surface, wounds still festered, threatening to reopen at the slightest touch. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Daniel's phone buzzed. He reached for it, his movements stiff, and turned the screen away just enough for Emma to notice. Her chest tightened, the familiar sting of doubt clawing at her. He looked up, his face carefully neutral. It's just an email from work. Nothing important. She forced a smile, nodding as if she believed him. But as he typed a reply, his fingers moving quickly, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. Again. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Could she trust him? Was he really being honest, or was he just better at lying now? The uncertainty gnawed at her, threatening to consume her. She remembered what the therapist had said. Trust is rebuilt through consistency, through actions, not words. But Daniel's actions were still shrouded in shadows. The next morning, as Daniel headed out for work, Emma hesitated before speaking. Can I see your phone? He stopped, his back stiffening. Why? Her heart raced. I need to know you're not hiding anything. I need to feel safe. His jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with hurt. I thought we were past this. We're not, she whispered, her voice cracking. Not yet. For a moment he looked as if he might refuse, but then he sighed, pulling his phone out and handing it to her. Go ahead. I have nothing to hide. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it, scrolling through his messages, his emails, his call logs. Everything seemed normal, innocent, until she found the deleted messages folder. Her stomach dropped as she opened it, finding a series of texts to a number with no name attached. The messages were brief, vague, but the familiarity in his tone was unmistakable. Can't talk now. Later. I miss you. We have to be careful. Emma's vision blurred as she stared at the words, her heart shattering all over again. Who is this? Her voice was cold, trembling with fury. Daniel's face went pale. It's no one. Just a work thing. A work thing? She laughed bitterly, tears streaming down her face. Are you seriously lying to me again? It's not what you think. He reached for her, desperation in his eyes. It's just someone who needed my help. That's all. Who? She demanded, her voice sharp. Who are you helping in secret? Who do you miss? Who do you have to be careful with? Daniel's shoulders slumped, his facade crumbling. It's Lauren. She's been reaching out to me. She's in trouble. She's been threatening to go public about the affair. I was trying to protect you, to protect us. Emma's heart twisted, anger and pain colliding. You were protecting yourself. You were lying to me. Again. I didn't want to hurt you, he pleaded, his eyes glistening with tears. I was trying to fix my mistakes. She backed away, shaking her head. You're still lying, still keeping secrets. How am I supposed to believe anything you say? Daniel's face fell, his shoulders trembling. I don't know. Emma felt the ground crumbling beneath her, her hope slipping away. She had given him a second chance, trusted him to change. But the shadows were still there, lurking behind every word. Without another word, she walked out, slamming the door behind her, the sound echoing through the empty house. Chapter 16. Confrontation and Consequences. Emma drove aimlessly, tears blurring her vision. She felt foolish, humiliated for believing that Daniel could change. She had opened her heart, let him back in, and he had shattered her again. Her phone buzzed and she glanced at the screen. It was Rachel. She answered, her voice raw. I was right, Rachel. He's still lying. He never stopped. Rachel's voice was soft, concerned. What happened? Emma told her everything. The deleted messages, the truth about Lauren, Daniel's half-baked excuses. He said he was protecting me, but he was just protecting himself. Rachel was silent for a moment. You don't have to keep doing this, Emma. You don't have to keep hurting yourself for him. Emma's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I know, but I don't know how to walk away. Maybe it's time you learned, Rachel whispered. The words sank in, heavy and unrelenting. Emma pulled over, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. She had tried so hard to forgive, to rebuild. But maybe it was time to accept that some things were too broken to fix. She wiped her tears, her heart aching. She couldn't keep sacrificing herself for a man who didn't deserve her trust. She needed to protect herself, to choose herself. For once, she needed to be the one to walk away. Days blurred into weeks, and the house felt emptier than ever. Emma moved through the rooms like a ghost, haunted by memories of laughter, love, and broken promises. She boxed up Daniel's things, each item a painful reminder of the life they had built together, the life that had crumbled under the weight of his betrayal. The nights were the hardest. She would lie awake, staring at the empty side of the bed, fighting the urge to reach for her phone and call him. She missed him. Missed the way his arms felt around her, the way he made her laugh. But she couldn't forget the lies, the deceit, the pain he had caused. She went back to therapy, this time alone, trying to make sense of the chaos in her heart. How do I move on? She asked, her voice trembling. How do I stop loving someone who hurt me so deeply? The therapist's gaze was gentle. Grief isn't just about losing someone. It's about losing the future you thought you had with them. Allow yourself to mourn that loss. Emma nodded, her chest tightening. She wasn't just grieving Daniel. She was grieving the life they were supposed to have, the family they were supposed to build, the dreams they were supposed to share, but she knew she couldn't stay trapped in the past. She needed to find a way forward. Chapter 19. New Beginnings 1. Saturday afternoon, Rachel showed up at her door, a determined look on her face. Enough moping. We're getting out of this house. You need fresh air, sunshine, and maybe a little retail therapy. Emma tried to protest, but Rachel was relentless, dragging her out to the local farmer's market. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of blooming flowers and freshly baked bread. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt a flicker of lightness, a glimmer of hope. They wandered through the stalls, laughing at Rachel's attempts to flirt with a handsome vendor and sampling way too many pastries. It felt good to laugh again, to feel normal, even if just for a little while. As they passed a stall selling handmade jewelry, Emma's eyes landed on a delicate silver bracelet, a small charm shaped like a bird in flight. It reminded her of freedom, of letting go. She bought it on impulse, slipping it onto her wrist, feeling a strange sense of peace. "Look at you," Rachel teased, nudging her playfully. "Buying yourself pretty things. I'm proud of you." Emma smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I'm trying," she admitted, "one day at a time." They spent the afternoon wandering, talking about everything and nothing. For a few hours, Emma allowed herself to forget the pain, to just be. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, she felt a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. She knew she still had a long way to go, that the road to healing would be messy and complicated. But she was moving forward, one step at a time. Chapter 20. Unfinished Business. Emma was sorting through the last of Daniel's boxes when she found it, a small, unmarked envelope tucked into the back of his desk drawer. Her heart raced as she opened it, revealing a handwritten note in Daniel's familiar scrawl. "Emma, I don't know how to say this, but I owe you the truth. All of it. There's more you don't know, and you deserve to hear it from me, not from anyone else. If you're willing to listen, I'm ready to talk. Daniel." Her hands trembled as she read the words, anger and curiosity swirling inside her. After everything he had done, after all the lies, there was still more? Part of her wanted to tear the note to shreds, to throw it away and never look back. But another part, the part that still loved him, the part that needed closure, wanted to hear him out. She sat down, her heart pounding. She had walked away to protect herself, to heal. But could she truly move on without knowing the whole truth? That night, she texted him. "I found your note. I'll listen. But this doesn't mean forgiveness. I need answers." His reply came, almost instantly. "I understand. Thank you." They agreed to meet the next day, at a small park where they used to walk together. Emma spent the night tossing and turning, bracing herself for whatever secrets were about to be revealed. Chapter 21. The Truth Unveiled. The air was crisp, the trees swaying gently as Emma waited by the bench. Her heart raced as she saw Daniel approaching, his face worn and tired. He looked older, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his mistakes. He sat down beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, Daniel took a deep breath, his voice cracking. "I didn't tell you everything. About Lauren. About why she's been threatening me." Emma's stomach twisted, her hands clenching into fists. "Go on." He looked down, shame flooding his eyes. "She got fired because of me. After the affair ended, she tried to blackmail me. She threatened to expose everything to my boss unless I helped her get a promotion." Emma didn't remember driving home. Her body moved on autopilot, her mind replaying Daniel's confession over and over again. The full truth. She had wanted it, demanded it. But now that she had it, she felt even more shattered. She paced the living room, her emotions a tangled mess of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything. The lies, the manipulation, the way he had protected himself at her expense. She felt like a fool for ever loving him, for believing in their marriage, for trusting him. Her phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. "Hey, just checking in. How did it go with Daniel?" Emma stared at the screen, her fingers trembling as she typed. "He told me everything. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to feel." The response was immediate. "Want me to come over?" She hesitated, then typed back, "Yes, I could use a friend right now." Chapter 23. Finding Solace. Rachel arrived within minutes, wrapping Emma in a tight hug before they even made it to the couch. "I'm here. Whatever you need." Emma's voice broke as she recounted everything. Daniel's confession, the blackmail, the lies upon lies. "I thought I needed to hear the truth. But now, I just feel lost. How do I move on from this?" Rachel's eyes were fierce. "By remembering who you are, by not letting his mistakes define your future. You were strong before him, and you'll be strong after him." Emma leaned into Rachel's embrace, tears soaking her shoulder. "I loved him. I still do. Even after everything. I hate that I still love him." "That doesn't make you weak," Rachel said gently. "It makes you human." They sat in silence, Rachel holding her close as she cried. It was the first time Emma allowed herself to truly grieve, not just the betrayal, but the loss of the man she had once loved, the future they were supposed to have. After a while, Emma's tears dried, leaving her exhausted but strangely lighter. "I can't keep living like this," she whispered. "I need to take my life back. I need to find out who I am without him." Rachel smiled, her eyes filled with pride. "Then let's do that. One step at a time." Chapter 24. Reclaiming. Herself, Emma made a list of things she wanted to do, things she had put off for years while being Daniel's wife. She wanted to travel, to write, to learn photography like she had always dreamed. She wanted to find herself again. She signed up for a photography class, her heart fluttering with nervous excitement as she walked into the studio for the first time. The instructor was kind, patient, showing her how to see the world through a different lens. She found solace in capturing moments, in freezing time, in seeing beauty where she once only saw pain. One evening, she stood by the lake, her camera aimed at the setting sun. The sky was ablaze with colors, the water reflecting hues of pink and gold. She snapped a photo, capturing the perfect moment, and for the first time in a long time, she felt peace. She looked down at the silver bracelet on her wrist, the little bird charm glinting in the fading light. It reminded her of freedom, of letting go. She smiled, her heart swelling with hope. She was moving on. Slowly, painfully, but she was moving on. Chapter 25. Unexpected Encounters. 3 months had passed since she last saw Daniel. 3 months of healing, of rediscovering herself, of learning to live with the truth. She didn't expect to see him. That day, standing outside the cafe they used to visit every Saturday, his face was thinner, his eyes hollow, guilt etched into every line. He looked up, his breath catching as he saw her. "Emma." She stood frozen, a storm of emotions swirling inside her. Love, hate, pain, longing. She had thought she was ready for this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for the way. Her heart ached at the sight of him. He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've missed you." Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but she stood her ground, her voice firm. "I've missed who I thought you were." Daniel's face crumpled, pain flashing in his eyes. "I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the broken man beneath the lies. He was suffering too, tormented by his mistakes. But that didn't change the damage he had done. It didn't change the fact that he had shattered her heart. "I know," she whispered, "but sorry doesn't fix this. It doesn't fix us." He swallowed, his voice trembling. Do you think we could ever find our way back?" Her heart broke all over again. She had asked herself that question 1,000 times, replayed their memories, wondered if forgiveness was possible. But as she stood there, face to face with him, she realized that the answer wasn't simple. It never would be. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again. And without trust, there's nothing." He looked down, his shoulders sagging. Emma sat at her kitchen table, staring at the envelope in front of her. It was from her lawyer. Divorce papers. Finalized at last. It felt like the end of an era, the closing of a chapter she had never imagined would end this way. She traced, her fingers over her name, her heart heavy. She thought of the promises they had made, the dreams they had shared. She remembered the way Daniel used to look at her, as if she were his whole world, but that was before the lies, before the betrayal, before everything shattered. She took a deep breath and signed her name. It was just ink on paper, but it felt like carving a piece of herself away. She set the pen down, her hands trembling. It was done. She was no longer his wife. She was Emma. Just Emma. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it away, her jaw tightening. She had cried enough. She had mourned enough. It was time to start living again. Chapter 27. New Beginnings. Emma threw herself into her photography, pouring her emotions into her art. She captured raw, unfiltered moments, people laughing, crying, embracing. She found beauty in vulnerability, in truth. Her work caught the attention of a local gallery, and they invited her to showcase her photos. The opening night was a whirlwind of nerves and excitement, her heart racing as she watched. People admiring her pieces, connecting with her vision. "You have a real gift," a man said, his voice warm. Emma turned to find a stranger standing beside her, his dark eyes reflecting the light from her photos. He extended his hand. "I'm Alex." She shook his hand, her heart fluttering unexpectedly. "Emma." They stood together, talking about art, life, and everything in between. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt a spark of hope. She was starting over, finding herself, and maybe, just maybe, she was ready to let someone new in. Chapter 28. Echoes of the past, but moving on wasn't as simple as signing a piece of paper or meeting someone new. Some nights Emma lay awake, haunted by memories of Daniel, his laughter, his touch, his lies. She wondered if he was hurting too, if he was thinking of her. She found herself rereading old text messages, looking at photos from happier times, questioning everything. Was it all a lie? Did he ever really love her? Or was she just another casualty of his deception? The questions lingered, echoing in the empty spaces of her heart. She hated how much power he still held over her, how much she still cared. She almost called him once, her finger hovering over his name, but she couldn't do it. She couldn't go back. She needed to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it was. Chapter 29. Unfinished Business. The knock on her door came on a rainy Sunday afternoon. Emma opened it, her heart skipping a beat when she saw Daniel standing. There, drenched from the rain. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw. "I know I shouldn't be here, but I can't move on without saying this." She crossed her arms, her guard immediately up. "We've said everything there is to say, Daniel. It's over." He looked at her with such desperation that it made her chest ache. "I know, but I need you to understand. I never meant to hurt you. I was weak. I was selfish. And I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me." His voice cracked, his eyes red. "I hate myself for what I did, but I don't hate you. I could never hate you. I still love you, Emma." Her heart twisted painfully. She wanted to believe him. wanted to fall into his arms, to pretend that none of it had happened. But she couldn't. She couldn't unlearn the truth, couldn't forget the pain. "I loved you too," she whispered. "But that wasn't enough to stop you from lying, from breaking my heart. Love doesn't excuse betrayal." Daniel's shoulders sagged, defeat washing over him. "I know, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. I needed you to know that losing you was the worst thing that's ever happened to me." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the shattered man beneath the bravado. But she also saw the man who had lied, who had betrayed her trust. She couldn't separate the two. "I'm trying to forgive you," she admitted, her voice wavering. "Not for you, but for me. Because I can't carry this anger forever. But forgiving you doesn't mean I can let you back in. It doesn't mean we can be who we were." A tear slipped down his cheek, his face crumpling. "I understand." She stepped back, her hand on the door. "Goodbye, Daniel." His eyes widened, his voice breaking. "Goodbye, Emma." She closed the door, leaning against it as sobs shook her body. She was letting go, truly letting go. But it hurt more than she ever imagined. Chapter 30. Moving forward. Emma continued her photography, her art reflecting her journey, pain, healing, hope. She kept seeing Alex, their connection growing slowly, carefully. She was learning to trust, again, to open her heart without fear. She visited her parents more often, rekindling relationships she had neglected. Months passed, and life gradually found a new rhythm. Emma immersed herself in her photography and cautiously explored her growing connection with Alex. He was patient, never pushing her to share more than she was ready to, and she appreciated his gentle presence. But some nights, the shadows of her past crept in. She would wake in a cold sweat, Daniel's voice echoing in her mind, the memories replaying like a broken record. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart heavy with the weight of all that was lost. She wondered if he still thought about her, if he regretted his choices, or if he had moved on. She wondered if he was with her, the woman who had shattered their marriage. Emma shook the thoughts away, frustrated with herself for letting him live rent-free in her mind. She had to let go. She deserved peace. Chapter 32. The Unexpected Encounter On. A sunny Saturday afternoon, Emma walked into her favorite cafe, hoping to get some work done. As she waited in line, her breath caught in her throat. There he was, Daniel, standing at the counter, his familiar profile sending a jolt through her. He looked different, thinner, his shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible burden. His hair was slightly longer, a little messier. He looked tired. For a moment, she considered slipping out before he saw her, but it was too late. He turned, his eyes widening as they locked with hers. "Emma." His voice was barely above, a whisper, a mixture of shock and longing. She straightened, her heart pounding. "Daniel." They stood there, frozen, the air thick with tension and unspoken words. The past surged between them, raw and unhealed. Daniel swallowed, his gaze flicking to the floor. I didn't expect to see you here. It's my favorite spot," she said, her voice colder than she intended. "Has been for years." He nodded, looking ashamed. "Right, of course." An awkward silence settled, both of them unsure of what to say. Finally, Daniel broke the silence, his voice soft. "You look good. Happier." Emma's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to be." She didn't owe him an explanation. She didn't owe him anything. His face fell, guilt flickering in his eyes. "I'm glad. You deserve that." The sincerity in his voice threw her off balance, her resolve faltering. This was the man she had loved, the man who had once been her best friend, the man who had shattered her heart. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stand tall. "Goodbye, Daniel." Before he could respond, she turned and walked out, her hands trembling. She didn't look back. Chapter 33. Echoes of the Past. The encounter with Daniel lingered, the sight of him reopening old wounds. Emma found herself thinking about him more than she wanted to, memories flooding her mind. She remembered lazy Sunday mornings wrapped in his arms, his laughter filling their home. She remembered his whispered promises, the way he looked at her on their wedding day. She remembered believing he was her forever. She also remembered the lies, the betrayal, the night she found out the truth, the way her world shattered, the night spent crying herself to sleep, the feeling of being utterly broken. The pain was still there, deep and aching, but it was no longer crippling. She had survived. She was healing, but she was also still haunted. Chapter 34. A step forward, Alex noticed the change in her, his eyes full of concern. "You've been distant lately. Is everything okay?" Emma hesitated, unsure how to explain. She wanted to move forward with him, but she was still tied to her past. How could she be fully present when part of her was stuck in the pain Daniel had left behind? "I ran into him," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Daniel, at the cafe." Alex's expression softened, understanding flickering in his eyes. "That must have been hard." "It was unexpected," she said, her voice shaking. "I thought I was over it, over him. But seeing him, it brought everything back." Alex reached out, his fingers brushing hers. "Healing isn't a straight line. It's okay to feel hurt even now. It doesn't mean you haven't moved forward." His words were gentle, his presence steady. Emma felt a wave of gratitude, relief washing over her. She didn't have to pretend with him. She didn't have to be perfect. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I really am." "I know," he said softly. "And I'll be here, however long it takes." For the first time since running into Daniel, Emma felt herself breathe again. Chapter 35. Unanswered questions. Days later, Emma found herself standing outside Daniel's apartment. She wasn't sure why she was there, only that she needed answers. She needed closure. She hesitated before knocking, her heart racing. The door opened, and Daniel's eyes widened in shock. "Emma? I need to know why," she said, her voice firm. "I need to understand how you could do that to me, to us." Daniel's face fell, his shoulders slumping. I don't know how to explain it." "Try," she demanded, her eyes blazing. "You owe me that much." The days following Emma's confrontation with Daniel were marked by a quiet intensity. She spent hours with her camera, trying to lose herself in the art, but even through the lens, she couldn't escape the haunting remnants of the past. The quiet was suffocating, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her chest. Alex tried his best to be there for her, offering gentle support without overwhelming her. They had dinner together most nights, and though they spoke about trivial things, the latest movies, a new coffee shop in town, the unspoken truth hung heavy between them. She was still trying to untangle the mess of her emotions. And he was patient, always understanding, never pushing. But Emma could feel the distance between them growing, even if it was imperceptible to Alex. The space she'd been carving for herself in her own mind felt like a vast chasm, and though Alex had patiently entered her world, she felt like she was still holding a part of herself back. It wasn't that. She didn't care about him. She did, deeply. But part of her still wasn't ready to let go of the life she'd once had with Daniel. And that uncertainty gnawed at her, whispering doubts in the back of her mind. Was she ready to truly open herself up to Alex? Or was she still trapped in the wreckage of her past? Chapter 37. The return of the past. It was late on a Thursday evening when the text came. Daniel wants to meet. He's asking for your forgiveness. The message from Rachel, her best friend, jolted Emma from her thoughts. She stared at the screen for a long moment, the words flashing before her, the weight of them sinking in. Rachel had been the one to help her pick up the pieces after the divorce, the one who had been there through every tear, every sleepless night. She had encouraged Emma to move forward, to heal, to look ahead. But now, Daniel was asking for something that Emma wasn't sure she could give. She stood up and paced around the apartment, her mind racing. What did he want? What could he possibly say now? After everything? Was it truly an apology? Or was he trying to absolve his guilt? Did she need to hear it at all? But then again, could she ever really heal without hearing it? Could she ever truly move on from the betrayal without understanding the depths of his regret? She wasn't sure. Chapter 38. The meeting. The meeting place was a small park, a neutral ground between their worlds. Emma arrived early, her heart pounding in her chest as she sat on a bench under the flickering streetlight. The night was chilly, the air crisp with the scent of impending rain. Her thoughts swirled, a whirlwind of past pain and present uncertainty. When Daniel finally appeared, looking even more worn than the last time she saw him, her breath caught in her throat. His eyes, once full of confidence, were now heavy with something else: regret, fear, shame. He hadn't changed much on the outside, but Emma could see the way he carried himself, the way his shoulders sagged. He had aged in these few months, the weight of his choices hanging over him like a permanent cloud. He stood there for a moment, silently watching her, before finally speaking. "Emma." His voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't used it in days. "Daniel," she replied, her voice tight, the words barely escaping her lips. He sat beside her, keeping a careful distance. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I couldn't live with myself without trying to make things right." Emma didn't answer, her gaze focused on the ground. She didn't know what to say, didn't know if she was ready to hear what he had to say. After a long silence, he continued, his voice barely audible. "I've been to therapy. I've been trying to understand why I did what I did, and I know it's no excuse, but I think I was just so afraid of losing you, of disappointing you. And instead of talking to you about it, I ran." Emma's chest tightened and she looked at him, her eyes hard. "You're telling me that after everything you're blaming fear? You don't think I was afraid too?" He winced at her words, but he nodded. "You're right. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Emma. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that I see the damage I caused. And I'm so sorry." She took a deep breath, trying to steady her emotions. Her mind screamed at her to walk away, to tell him it was too late, that the hurt would never go away. But the ache in her chest told her otherwise. She had loved this man once. She had trusted him. The betrayal had cut deep. But the wound was not the only thing left between them. There were still fragments of the love they had shared. Still, remnants of the life they had once dreamed about. "I don't know what you expect from me," Emma said quietly. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. But I need you to know something." She turned to face him. "You broke me. You destroyed everything I thought I knew about us, about love, and I'm not sure I can ever fully rebuild from that." Emma's life had taken on a new rhythm. It was not a return to normalcy, but rather a slow, deliberate process of rebuilding. Her days were now marked by the hum of quiet moments, sipping coffee in the early mornings, working on her photography, projects, finding comfort in the silence that filled the gaps between her thoughts. But there was always an undercurrent of tension, a sense that something wasn't fully resolved. She had stopped talking to Daniel. The apologies had been made, but Emma realized that his words could never undo the years of deceit. She couldn't afford to linger on the what-ifs or the pieces of a life they'd never have together again. Still, a part of her missed the version of herself that had believed in their love so fiercely. That part was fading, but it wasn't gone entirely. Alex had been patient with her, never rushing her to move forward, but Emma sensed his frustration, a quiet disappointment that he couldn't quite hide. They had dinner together most nights, shared moments of affection, but it was all like walking on eggshells. There was an understanding between them now, one rooted in uncertainty. Emma wasn't sure if she was ready to let go of the remnants of her past, or if she could let Alex in fully. She knew he deserved more, deserved to feel like the center of her world, but every time she tried to get closer, there was an invisible barrier between them. It was the betrayal, the mistrust, the cracks in her heart that she couldn't seem to fix. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Alex sat beside her on the couch, his hand resting gently on hers. "I can't keep pretending like everything's okay. If you're not," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I'm here, Emma, but I can't keep waiting forever for you to decide if you're ready for us." Her chest tightened at his words. She hadn't realized until now how much he had been holding back. She had been so focused on her own pain that she hadn't considered how her indecision was affecting him. "I don't know if I'm ready, Alex," she whispered. "I don't know if I ever will be." He didn't say anything immediately, just sat there, his fingers absently tracing the lines of her palm. Then, after a long pause, he spoke again. "I'm not asking for certainty. I'm asking for you to meet me halfway, to show me that we have a chance, even if it's a small one." Emma closed her eyes, taking in the weight of his words. The air between them felt thick with the promise of change, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She wanted to believe that they could have something real, something untainted by the past. But she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that she was only holding on to Alex because she was afraid of being alone, afraid of confronting her own unresolved pain. "I need more time," she said finally, the words barely above a whisper. "I can't promise you anything, but I'm trying. I really am." Alex's hand tightened around hers, and for the briefest moment, Emma felt the warmth of hope flicker in her chest. Maybe there was still a chance. Maybe, with time, they could find a way back to each other, or maybe they would both have to learn how to let go. Chapter 41. A Ghost in the Distance. 2 weeks later, as the leaves began to change color, Emma found herself at a crossroads. The grief she had been carrying was still there, but it had shifted, become less of a weight on her chest and more of a quiet, lingering presence in the back of her mind. She had spent hours going through old photographs, memories of her life with Daniel, trying to make sense of everything. There were moments of joy, moments of love that she couldn't completely erase, but there were also moments of betrayal, of shattered trust that made everything feel hollow. One evening, as she was leaving her apartment to meet Alex for a walk, her phone buzzed. "I need to see you." "It's important." The message was from Rachel. Emma's stomach dropped. She hadn't spoken to Rachel much in the past few weeks, both women processing their lives in silence, each wrapped up in their own struggles. "What's going on?" Emma replied, her fingers trembling. Rachel's response came quickly. "It's about Daniel. You need to know something." Chapter 42. Unraveling the threads, Emma met Rachel at a cafe, her nerves frayed with anticipation. When Rachel sat down across from her, there was an unreadable expression on her face. "Is this about Daniel?" Emma asked, unable to hide the tension in her voice. Rachel nodded, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "It's more complicated than you think, Em." Emma felt a sinking feeling in her chest, the familiar sense of dread rising again. "What do you mean?" Rachel hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking around the cafe before locking on to Emma's. "I've been hearing things. Daniel, he's involved in something bigger than just his mistake with you." "What are you talking about?" Emma's pulse quickened. "There's this guy, Alex Harper." The weight of the decision gnawed at Emma as she lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling. Her mind was consumed with fragments of conversation, half-finished thoughts, and unanswered questions. The feeling of being at a crossroads was suffocating, each path ahead shrouded in uncertainty. She couldn't decide what was more terrifying, confronting Daniel and whatever secrets he was hiding, or risking everything with Alex, who seemed to be growing more distant every day. Rachel's warning kept echoing in her mind. Alex Harper isn't just a private investigator. Those words cut deeper than she was ready to admit. Could Daniel really be involved in something so dangerous? She hadn't considered that possibility, too wrapped up in the personal betrayal, to look at the bigger picture. The fact that Rachel, of all people, was the one to bring it to her attention only made Emma's heart tighten. She wasn't sure she trusted Rachel anymore, not after everything that had happened. But a small part of her couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel might be telling the truth. Emma turned over, glancing at the clock. It was well past midnight. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. "It's time to talk. Meet me tomorrow." It was Daniel. Chapter 45. The Conversation. The next day, Emma met Daniel at a park bench near the edge of town, the early autumn chill making her breath visible in the air. Her heart beat heavily in her chest, and despite everything, she could feel a tinge of familiarity in his presence. Old wounds, old emotions threatening to resurface. Daniel looked different than she remembered. There was a weariness in his eyes, a shadow that hadn't been there before. He didn't smile when she approached, but he didn't seem angry either. It was like they were two strangers trying to make sense of a shared history, a history that neither of them knew how to navigate anymore. "I got your message," Emma said quietly, sitting across from him. "What is this about, Daniel?" He hesitated for a long moment before speaking. "I know what you've heard," he said, voice low. "About the investigator?" Emma nodded slowly, trying to read his expression. "Rachel told me." "What's going on, Daniel? Is this about you, or is there something more at play here?" Daniel's gaze flickered with something between guilt and fear. "There's a lot you don't know, Emma, about me, about everything." She waited, heart pounding, every instinct screaming for the truth. "I wasn't just messing up our marriage with an affair," he said, his voice tight. "There's more to it. I've been working with some people, and I got involved in things I never should have." Emma's pulse quickened. "What do you mean? What kind of things?" Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "I've been laundering money for a man named Alex Harper. He's been using me, and now it's spiraling out of control. I didn't want any of this to affect you, but it's too late to hide the truth now." The words hit Emma like a slap to the face. The world seemed to tilt beneath her, and she struggled to steady herself. "You're telling me that you were involved with him?" Daniel nodded. "I made a mess of everything. I thought I could get out of it. But it's complicated, Emma. I'm in deep." Emma's mind raced. Alex Harper, the same name Rachel had mentioned. And now it was clear that everything she had suspected, everything she feared, was true. Daniel wasn't just a man who had betrayed her. He had been tangled in something far darker, something that could destroy both of them. "So, this is why you've been acting like this?" Emma whispered. "This is why you've been lying to me?" "I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to be dragged into this mess. I thought if I kept it hidden long enough, I could fix it on my own." Daniel's voice cracked. "I was wrong. The tears that Emma had been holding back threatened to spill, but she held them in, blinking. Rapidly, the rage she had been feeling for months was nothing compared to what she was feeling now. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me?" "I thought I could protect you," Daniel said, his eyes meeting hers with a rawness she hadn't seen in years. "But I was wrong about everything. About us. About my choices. And now I've made a deal with the devil and I can't get out." Emma's heart twisted in her chest, torn between anger and pity. She had never imagined the extent of Daniel's involvement in this world, this criminal world. It felt like the man she had once loved was a complete stranger. "I don't know what to do with this," Emma said, swallowing hard. "I don't know if I can even look at you the same way again." Daniel's shoulders slumped. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking for you to know the truth." There was silence between them for a long time, the weight of the past hovering over them like a cloud. Finally, Emma stood up, her legs unsteady beneath her. Emma sat at her kitchen table, staring at the message on her phone. "We need to talk. It's urgent." Her heart was heavy. Alex's text was clear, insistent, but after everything with Daniel, Emma had no idea what to think anymore. She hadn't responded yet, afraid that whatever conversation they would have could push her into a decision she wasn't ready to make. Her mind was still consumed by Daniel's confession, his involvement in something criminal, the lies, the betrayal. How could she even begin to trust anyone again? A knock on the door snapped her from her thoughts. It was Alex. Without saying a word, he stepped inside as she opened the door, his face a mix of concern and frustration. His eyes searched hers, waiting for her to speak first, to give him something, anything, that would explain why she hadn't replied. "Emma," his voice was low, unsure. "I need to know what's going on. I need you to be honest with me." Emma felt the weight of his words, felt the pressure of everything that had been left unspoken. She had to decide if she was going to go down this path with him, if she could even trust him in the wake of everything that had happened with Daniel. But how could she possibly make that decision when her whole world felt like it was crumbling? "I don't even know what's real anymore," Emma muttered, her voice cracking. "Daniel, he's involved in something bad. He's been lying to me for months. No, years." Alex's eyes darkened, and for the first time, Emma saw the tension in his face. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "What kind of things, Emma? What's he done?" "I don't know all the details. I don't think I want to know," she said, her hands trembling. "But it's enough to know that he's not just some man who cheated on me. He's involved in something far bigger than us, and now I'm stuck between what I've always known and a future I'm too afraid to take." Alex didn't speak right away. He reached out, gently taking her hand, his touch grounding her in the chaos swirling inside her. "Emma, I'm not here to pressure you," he said quietly. "But you have to understand something. I've been patient because I thought you needed time to figure this out. But if you want a life with me, if you want to move forward, then you have to make a decision. Not just for me, but for you. For what you want." She looked at him, really looked at him. And in that moment, she understood something crucial. Alex wasn't perfect. She wasn't sure if anyone was. But he had been there, standing by her when no one else had. He had given her space. But now, he was showing her that he wasn't going to wait forever. But was she ready? Could she step away from her past and take that leap into something uncertain, something different? She wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe that it was possible, that it was okay to move forward. But her heart was still tangled in the aftermath of her marriage, and no matter how much she wanted to let go of the past, she couldn't just erase the years she had spent with Daniel. "I don't know," Emma said softly. "I don't know." If I can leave all of that behind and just move on, you... She cut herself off, closing her eyes as the weight of it all settled over her. You're asking me to trust again? And I don't know how. Alex squeezed her hand, his voice steady, but full of urgency. Emma, I'm not asking you to forget the past. I'm asking you to let it go. I'm asking you to take a step forward with me. Her mind swirled with conflicting emotions. She could feel the pull of the past, the hurt, the betrayal, but she also felt the hope Alex was offering. Could she take the risk? Could she build something new, something better, even with the remnants of her broken marriage still haunting her? Are you ready to forgive him? Alex asked quietly, his gaze soft but penetrating. And if not, can you forgive yourself? The question hung in the air like a weight Emma didn't know how to lift. She felt the pressure of it crushing her chest, but she also felt a strange sense of clarity beginning to form, as though Alex's words were carving out a new path, one that led away from her past, even if it was terrifying to follow. I don't know if I can forgive him, Emma said after a long pause, her voice barely above a whisper. But maybe I can forgive myself for staying too long, for believing the lies. Maybe I can start there. Alex smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. It's a start, and it's all we need right now. Chapter 48. The Choice. The days following her conversation with Alex were marked by an uneasy stillness. Emma hadn't heard from Daniel since their meeting at the park. She had no idea where things stood with him, or if there was anything left to salvage. What if he truly was beyond redemption? What if the man she once loved had become someone unrecognizable? The more Emma thought about it, the more she realized she couldn't continue living in the limbo of indecision. She had to choose. Days passed in a blur of uncertainty for Emma. Her decision weighed heavily on her heart, but as she sat in her quiet apartment, the pieces of her life slowly began to fall into place. She couldn't erase the past, no matter how hard she tried. But she was starting to realize that it wasn't about erasing it. It was about learning how to live alongside it, without letting it define her every moment. Alex had been patient, giving her the space she needed, but the silence between them had grown thick with unspoken words. He had waited for her to decide, but now, with the cracks between them widening, Emma knew she couldn't put it off any longer. The sound of her phone buzzing on the table broke her thoughts. It's Alex. Taking a deep breath, she picked up. Hey. Her voice felt tentative, like she was testing the waters, unsure of what would happen next. Hey, Alex replied, his tone warm but cautious. I've been thinking, maybe we should talk. I know, she said quietly, rubbing her temples. I think it's time we do. Chapter 50. The Weight of Words. They met at the small cafe near her apartment. Alex was already sitting at a table in the corner when she walked in, a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up as she approached, and his eyes softened when they met hers. Emma felt a knot in her chest, but there was a sense of calm in his gaze, as if he was waiting for her to find the words she needed to say. Alex, she started, sitting down across from him, her hands gripping the sides of the chair. I've been thinking about everything, about you, about Daniel, about what I need in my life right now. Alex nodded, his expression a mixture of patience and understanding. I know this isn't easy for you. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady her nerves. I've been living in this place where everything feels like it's falling apart. My marriage, my trust in myself, in others. I wasn't sure if I could ever let go of all the anger, the hurt. I thought maybe I needed to forgive Daniel, but I'm realizing that it's not about forgiving him for what he's done. It's about forgiving myself for staying in a place where I couldn't be happy. Emma, Alex said softly, reaching across the table to take her hand, his touch steady and warm. You don't have to do this alone. I've told you before, and I'll keep saying it. If you want a future with me, I'll be here. But only if it's something you want, too. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at him, the weight of the past month crashing down on her. She had been so consumed by her anger toward Daniel, by the betrayal, that she hadn't even considered what was right in front of her, the steady, unwavering support Alex had given her. He wasn't perfect, but he was here, and that meant something. I don't know if I'm ready, she said, voice trembling, but I'm ready to try, to see where this could go, to not be afraid of what the future holds. Alex smiled, his hand tightening around hers. We'll take it one step at a time. Chapter 51. Letting go. It wasn't long after their conversation that Emma made the decision to meet with Daniel. She needed closure, a way to move on completely. She hadn't seen him since that final phone call, and the idea of facing him again stirred a mixture of emotions in her. She met him at a park, the place where they had first fallen in love. It felt surreal to be here again, in the same spot where so many happy memories had been made. But now, everything had changed. Daniel was standing by a bench when she arrived, his posture rigid, as if waiting for her to arrive at some conclusion that would free him from the weight of his mistakes. When he saw her, his expression softened, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. Emma, he said quietly, stepping forward. I've been thinking about this a lot. About everything. I'm not here for answers, Daniel, Emma replied, her voice steady but her heart pounding. I'm here for closure. I don't know what you expect from me anymore, but I'm done holding on to something that doesn't exist. Daniel looked down, guilt washing over his face. I never meant for it to end like this. I was selfish, and I don't even know where to begin. You don't have to explain yourself, Emma interrupted gently. I've done enough explaining for both of us. I need to move forward with my life. There was a long pause, and then Daniel nodded slowly. I get it. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm sorry, Emma. I really am. For a moment, Emma didn't know what to say. The anger and hurt she'd carried for so long still lingered. But there was something else there now. An acceptance. She couldn't erase the past, but she could stop letting it control her future. I'm not asking you to change who you are, she said finally. But I'm letting you go. I can't keep living in this place where we're both stuck in the past. Daniel swallowed, and for the first time, Emma saw him not as the man who had betrayed her. Life, as Emma had come to understand, wasn't a straight line. It was a winding road, full of unexpected turns, twists, and moments of clarity that came in fleeting bursts. She was beginning to rebuild piece by piece, but something lingered in her mind. Something unresolved that she couldn't shake off. Her relationship with Alex was moving forward, but it felt fragile, as though both of them were waiting for something to break the delicate balance they had worked hard to find. Emma wanted to believe that they had a future together, but old habits were hard to forget. She caught herself, sometimes staring at him when he wasn't looking, trying to read him as if she could somehow see his secrets in the way he moved. It wasn't fair to him, but she couldn't help it. And then there was Daniel. The closure she'd found had been real, or so she thought. But after weeks of silence, she started hearing whispers from mutual friends. Nothing direct, just rumors, suggestions, hints that Daniel had moved on, that he was seeing someone new. It shouldn't have mattered, but it did. The thought of him with someone else stirred a strange mix of resentment and relief inside her. What was she supposed to feel? Chapter 54. The phone call it was a Sunday afternoon when she received the call. She had just returned from the bookstore, a cup of coffee in hand, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Emma?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but something about it made her stomach drop. "Yes? This is Nadia," the woman said, her voice hesitant. I'm a friend of Daniel's. I know this might sound strange, but I need to talk to you. It's important." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "What's this about?" I think you should know something." Nadia's voice faltered, and there was a long pause on the other end before she continued. "Daniel, he's not okay. He's been going through some things, and I think you should know that he hasn't really moved on. Not in the way everyone thinks." Emma's heart rate quickened. "What do you mean?" "He's been asking about you. A lot. And I don't think he's done with whatever you two had, no matter what he's saying to everyone else. I think he might still love you." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She could barely breathe as she processed what Nadia had said. "I didn't call to stir things up," Nadia continued. "But I think you deserve to know. He's not being honest with himself, or with anyone else." Before Emma could respond, Nadia hung up. She stood there, holding her phone, the quiet of her apartment suddenly feeling suffocating. What did this mean? Had she truly moved on? Or had she been lying to herself, pretending that everything had been put to rest? Chapter 55. Doubts and decisions. The phone call stayed with her for days, gnawing at her in ways she hadn't anticipated. She didn't reach out to Daniel, though. She couldn't. The whole point of closing that chapter had been to let him go, to let herself go. But the idea that he might still harbor feelings for her, that maybe he hadn't moved on, that made everything feel less final. She couldn't ignore the emotional turmoil that swirled inside her, and though she didn't want to, she couldn't stop herself from wondering about Alex. Was she truly in a place where she could give him what he deserved? Could she let go of the past and embrace the possibility of a future with him? Or was she still holding on to something that would always keep her tethered to the past? Sitting at her kitchen table one evening, Emma faced the most difficult decision she had made in a long time. There were no clear answers, no right or wrong path, just choices, each leading to different possibilities. Chapter 56. Confronting the Past. The next morning, Emma made a decision. She needed to see Daniel. She had to know for herself if he was truly over her, or if he was still clinging to the ghost of their past. She couldn't keep pretending that she was fine with letting it go, if there was a part of her that still wasn't. She drove to the house he had bought after their separation, the place where so many of their dreams had fallen apart. Standing outside, her breath caught in her throat. The decision to come here had felt inevitable, but standing on his doorstep, she suddenly felt vulnerable, exposed. When Daniel answered the door, there was a moment of silence between them. His face, once so familiar, now seemed like a stranger's. "Emma," he said quietly, stepping aside to let her in. She hesitated, then walked past him. "We need to talk." Chapter 57. The Truth. They sat in the living room, the space between them heavy with unspoken words. "I got a call," Emma said, looking him straight in the eye. "From Nadia. She told me you haven't moved on, that you still care about me." Daniel's face went pale, his eyes darting away from hers. "She shouldn't have told you that." "Why not?" she asked, her voice shaking with emotion. A few days passed, but Emma's thoughts remained unsettled. The conversation with Daniel had given her clarity, but also left behind a trace of uncertainty. She could feel the weight of the decisions she'd made. The past wasn't something she could easily cast aside, nor could she erase the doubts that lingered. As much as she told herself that she was ready to start fresh, She couldn't help but feel a pang whenever she saw Alex. Their relationship, while growing, felt fragile. His words, his touch, felt comforting, but also tentative, as if he was waiting for her to pull away. There were moments when Emma wondered if they were simply filling the silence left by their broken pasts, or if there was something more substantial waiting to grow between them. The world around her seemed to move on at its own pace, indifferent to her inner conflict. The days bled into weeks, and Emma found herself struggling to find a balance between what she had with Alex and the echoes of her relationship with Daniel. She often wondered whether she had truly forgiven herself, or if she was still running from the pain, trying to mask it with someone else's love. Chapter 60. The Unspoken Truth. Alex had been patient, too patient. Emma knew this. He never pushed her for more than she could give, and while part of her appreciated it, another part felt suffocated by it. She wanted to be open with him, to truly commit. But how could she when the wounds from her past were still so raw? One evening, Alex came over to her apartment after work. He had always been a calm presence in her life, a constant source of reassurance. He didn't ask about Daniel anymore, nor did he question the things Emma couldn't say. But tonight, there was something different in his eyes, something that made her stomach twist. "Hey, Emma," he said, settling beside her on the couch. "There's something I've been meaning to talk to you about." Her heart skipped a beat. She had been waiting for this moment, for him to ask the hard questions she had been avoiding. "What is it?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "I'm not in a rush," he said, his voice soft, "but I think it's time we had a conversation about us." Emma tensed. The words hung between them, heavy with the weight of their meaning. "Are you asking me for something more?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I don't want to pressure you, but I need to know if we're on the same page. I need to know if you're ready for this, for us." His words hung in the air like a question she didn't have the answer to. Emma swallowed, feeling the sting of her own silence. She could feel the truth within her. How could she truly move forward with Alex if she wasn't fully ready to let go of Daniel? How could she expect him to trust her if she couldn't even trust herself? "I don't know, Alex," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I want to be with you, but there's still so much I'm holding on to, so much I haven't figured out. I'm not sure if I'm the person you need me to be right now." He reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "You don't have to have all the answers. I just need to know you're trying, that you're willing to try." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She didn't want to hurt him. She didn't want to disappoint him. But the truth was, she couldn't offer him the certainty he needed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I think I need more time." Chapter 61. The Choice. The days following their conversation were tense, laden with unspoken words. Emma found herself pulled in two directions: toward Alex, who seemed so patient and understanding, and toward the ghost of Daniel, whose presence still lingered in the corners of her mind. She couldn't have both. She couldn't keep waiting, living in a limbo between two worlds. One morning, Emma decided to visit Daniel. It wasn't about rekindling anything. She wasn't seeking closure, not in the way she had before. But she needed to see him, to look him in the eye, and understand if what Nadia had said was true. If he had really moved on, or if he was still clinging to something that had long since ended. When Daniel opened the door, he seemed surprised, but he didn't hesitate to invite her in. They stood in the living room, a space that had once felt so full of possibility, but now felt empty and cold. "What's going on, Emma?" Daniel asked, his tone softer than she had expected. "I need to know if you're really okay," she said bluntly, her voice steady. "Nadia told me that you've been asking about me, and I need to know if that's true." Because if it is, I need to make a decision. About everything. Daniel's expression softened, but there was a guardedness in his eyes. I never stopped thinking about you, Emma, but that doesn't mean I want us to get back together. It just means you were part of me, and it's hard to forget that. Emma swallowed hard, her throat tight. She wasn't sure what she was expecting to hear, but this wasn't it. The days after Alex's message blurred together like the soft hues of a fading sunset. Emma felt the sting of his departure in the hollow quiet of her apartment. She moved through each day with an automatic routine, waking, working, eating, sleeping, but her mind was never still. The weight of what she had lost, what she hadn't fully appreciated until it was gone, pressed on her like a constant ache. She had convinced herself that ending things with Alex had been the right choice, that she wasn't ready to fully be with him, and that he deserved more. But now, in the emptiness that followed, doubts crept in. Had she really been protecting him, or had she just been afraid of facing her own brokenness? One evening after work, Emma sat in front of her computer, staring at an empty message draft. She hadn't heard from Daniel since their final conversation in the park, and though a part of her wanted to reach out, she feared what that might mean. Was she looking for closure, or was she simply avoiding facing the painful truths about her own choices? The sound of her phone buzzing on the coffee table broke her thoughts. It was a text from Nadia. Are you okay? I can come over if you need company. Emma hesitated, then quickly typed back. I'm fine. Just thinking a lot. Thanks for checking in. She put the phone down and rubbed her temples. Sometimes the silence was suffocating. Even though she was surrounded by people who cared about her, it felt like the walls of her own mind were closing in. Nadia had always been there for her, but Emma wasn't sure she had the energy to keep leaning on her. It wasn't fair. Chapter 67. The Unexpected Visitor. The doorbell rang the next day around noon. Emma had just finished a light lunch and was pacing in the living room, trying to sort through the jumble of thoughts in her head. She wasn't expecting anyone, but she went to the door, curiosity pushing her forward. When she opened it, she froze. Standing on the other side was Daniel. His hair, a little longer than she remembered, fell loosely over his forehead, and his eyes were tired, as though he hadn't slept in days. His hands were stuffed in the pockets of his jacket, his posture stiff, like he wasn't sure how to approach her. Hi, Daniel said quietly, his voice softer than she remembered. Emma didn't know what to say. She had spent so many nights replaying their last conversation, analyzing her own feelings, trying to decide whether reaching out to him was a mistake. But here he was, standing on her doorstep. What are you doing here? She asked, trying to keep the surprise from her voice. I needed to see you, Daniel replied, looking down for a moment before meeting her eyes again. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now, but I couldn't leave things like they were. I've been thinking a lot, and I realized that I left things unfinished. With you. With us. Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready to confront the ghosts of her past, but she couldn't shut the door in his face either. Not after everything they had shared. Daniel, I don't know if I can go through this again, she said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. I've hurt you. And Alex. I've hurt myself too. I'm not sure who I am anymore. He stepped closer, his eyes searching her face, as if trying to find the words that would make everything clear. I don't have the answers, Emma. I don't know what comes next. But I can't keep pretending that I don't care. That what we had doesn't matter. Maybe we don't have to figure it out today or tomorrow. But I needed you to know that I still want to try. She swallowed hard, looking away. The temptation to reach for him was almost too much. But she had already made so many mistakes. and she wasn't sure if she could live with making another one. "I don't know if I can be what you need, Daniel. I don't know if I even know what I need anymore." There was a silence between them, thick with unresolved tension. Daniel didn't speak, but his presence was enough. His very existence, in that moment, seemed to say everything she wasn't sure she could put into words. Finally, he spoke again, his voice softer but resolute. "I'm not asking you to have it all figured out. I'm just asking for a chance to talk, to understand where we stand." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his words press against her chest. She didn't know where it would lead, or if she was even ready for any of it. But the idea of letting go of this, of him, seemed just as painful as everything else she had lost. "I don't know if I can give you that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'll listen." Chapter 68. The unraveling over. The next few weeks, Emma and Daniel met in small, quiet places. Cafes, parks, places where they could talk without the pressure of the world weighing down on them. Emma stared at Alex, the weight of his words hanging in the air between them. His presence, once a source of comfort, now felt like a shadow, a reminder of everything that had been fractured between them. His eyes held a quiet desperation, a silent plea for another chance, but Emma wasn't sure if she could give him that. "Alex," she began, her voice fragile, almost lost in the quiet of the apartment. "I don't know if I can go back. I don't know if we can go back." His gaze dropped for a moment, as if he was searching for a way to make her understand, to reach her in a way that words alone couldn't. He had always been the one to speak, to fix things. But now, the silence between them was thick with unsaid things. "I never wanted to hurt you, Emma," he said, his voice steady but laced with regret. "I know I wasn't perfect, but I've been trying to be better. I've been thinking about what I want, and it's you. It always has been." Emma felt a tug in her chest. There was truth in his words, but there was also something deeper, something she wasn't sure she could face. The love they had shared, the betrayal, the shattered trust, it all seemed too much to untangle. She had always believed that if they just communicated better, if they just tried harder, they could overcome anything. But now, the truth felt too complicated, too layered for simple solutions. She took a deep breath, the weight of her emotions pulling her under. "I need time, Alex. I need space to figure out who I am, who we are, or if we can ever be who we were." He nodded slowly, the understanding in his eyes softening the sting of rejection. "I get it. I'm not asking for everything right now. I just want you to know that I'm here. No matter what." Emma swallowed hard, blinking back tears that she had tried to hold back for too long. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, she knew she couldn't rush the process of healing. And she didn't know if Alex was the person she could heal with, or if that was even fair to him. Chapter 71. The Road Not Taken. The days that followed were filled with quiet reflection. Emma spent her evenings wandering the city, finding solace in the small, solitary moments, sitting by the river, walking through the park where she and Daniel had once talked for hours. She needed to find clarity, a way to navigate the chaos that had become her life. But it wasn't just about finding clarity. It was about confronting the pieces of herself that had been hidden in the wake of all the betrayals. She couldn't move forward until she accepted the weight of her past, the lies, the hurt, the confusion. It was all tangled together, and she couldn't simply wish it away. In the midst of her uncertainty, Daniel reached out. They had continued their conversations, but always at a distance, as if neither of them could fully commit to whatever it was they were trying to rebuild. She had told him that she needed time, and he had respected that, though the distance between them grew with each passing day. But one evening, as Emma sat in her apartment, staring at a blank page, Daniel's name flashed on her phone. Can we talk? She hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen. She hadn't been ready to speak to him, not fully, but something inside her stirred, a desire to understand, to know if what they had was worth salvaging. She sat back, the quiet hum of her apartment surrounding her like a soft embrace, and for the first time in weeks, she realized that maybe she wasn't the only one who had been waiting. Chapter 72. Unspoken Truths. Daniel arrived at her door that evening, his expression open but guarded. There was no rushing, no desperate need in his eyes. He had learned the art of patience, of giving her the space she had asked for, but the air between them still buzzed with unspoken words. "Hey," he said, his voice soft but steady. "Hey," Emma replied, stepping aside to let him in. They settled into the living room, both of them aware of the weight of what hadn't been said between them. Emma took a deep breath before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot, Daniel, about us, about what happened, about everything, and I don't know if I'm ready to figure it out. I don't know if we can figure it out." Daniel nodded slowly, not interrupting, letting her find her way through her words. His hands rested on his lap, fingers tapping lightly against the fabric of his jeans. "I don't have any easy answers, Emma," he said after a long silence. "I don't even know what I want anymore. I think I just want us, to be honest, to stop hiding from each other, from ourselves." "I don't know how to be honest anymore," she whispered, feeling the weight of that confession settle heavily on her chest. "I've spent so long running from the truth, from my own mistakes, from everything that's broken. I don't know if there's enough left of me to fix anything." "You're not broken, Emma," Daniel said, his voice steady and certain. "You're just human." Weeks passed, each day a delicate balancing act between the past and the future. Emma found herself caught between two worlds, the life she had once known with Alex and the fragile possibility of something new with Daniel. She had thought she would know the right choice, the one that would feel like the most natural step forward. But nothing had come easily. She spent long nights awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of her indecision gnawing at her. The uncertainty of what she truly wanted, what she truly needed, was becoming unbearable. She hadn't realized how much the space she'd carved out for herself was becoming a cage. And yet, with Alex, things felt different. He had stepped back, given her the space she asked for, but his presence still loomed. Every word, every action, was carefully measured. She knew he was waiting for the moment when she might let him back in, but something inside her recoiled at the thought. Was it guilt? Was it love? Was it simply that she needed more time? Then there was Daniel. Their conversations had started slow but built into something more meaningful. They shared pieces of themselves that had long been buried, conversations about the things they'd both hidden, the emotional scars they hadn't faced. With him, there was no expectation of fixing what had been broken, no rush to return to what they once had. It was a different kind of connection, one that Emma wasn't sure how to label, but didn't want to lose. But the weight of Alex's quiet presence continued to bear down on her. It wasn't just the guilt that kept her tethered to him. It was the question of what to do with the life they had shared, the life she had once believed in. One evening, Alex called her. "Can we talk?" His voice was quiet, almost uncertain, a far cry from the confident tone she had once known him for. She hesitated. "About what?" "About us," he said simply. "About where we go from here. I think it's time we really talked about what happens next." Emma glanced at the clock. It was late, but she knew this conversation couldn't wait much longer. She couldn't keep avoiding it. Maybe tonight she would find the clarity she needed, or maybe it would tear the last remnants of their relationship apart. All right, come, over. Chapter 75. The confrontation Alex arrived shortly after, his face drawn, eyes tired. Emma could see the vulnerability he was trying to mask. He wasn't the same man she had known before everything fell apart, but he was still her husband. Or at least, he was still someone she had once loved with a fierceness that now felt foreign. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Emma couldn't help but replay all. The years that had led them here, the love they had built, and the betrayal that had torn it apart. Emma, Alex began, his voice raw. I've thought about this a lot. About us. And I can't keep pretending that I'm okay with where things are. I don't know if we'll ever go back to what we had, but I don't want to lose you. Not completely. She looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of his words. I don't know what to say anymore. I can't keep living like this, not knowing if I'm making the right choice, if I'm staying with you because I feel like I have to or because I want to. I don't even know if I can want to anymore. Alex's eyes darkened. Are you saying you don't love me? Emma felt the ache in her chest at his words, but she couldn't lie to him. Not now. I don't know if I do. Not in the way I used to. I don't know if it's enough anymore. The hurt flashed across his face, but he didn't retreat, didn't pull away. What does that mean for us, Emma? If you don't know if you love me, if you're not sure about this anymore, what does that leave us with? I don't know, she whispered. Maybe we just have to accept that we've changed. Maybe we're not the same people we used to be. Maybe we can't go back. Alex's hands gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. I don't believe that. I don't believe that we're just supposed to walk away from everything we've built. I know I hurt you. I know I did things that I can never undo. But I still want you. I want us. Emma met his gaze, her heart racing. She didn't know how to respond. Didn't know if there was even a part of her left. That could feel the same way. All she had were questions that refused to be answered. But one thing was clear. There was no easy way forward. Whatever she chose would come with consequences. Chapter 76. The breaking point. In the days that followed, Emma wrestled with her emotions. The nights were the hardest. She couldn't stop thinking about the choice before her. Could she ever truly forgive Alex? Could she trust him again after everything? She met with Daniel several times, their conversations becoming more meaningful, more intimate. With him, the weight of the past didn't feel as heavy. The weeks after Emma's decision were a blur of fractured days. She moved out of the apartment that had once felt like home, into a small rental unit on the edge of the city. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't what she had imagined for herself, but it was hers. The silence of the space echoed with both the promise of new beginnings and the weight of unresolved endings. The first few nights were the hardest. The quiet seemed oppressive, like a constant reminder that everything had changed. She found herself replaying the final conversation with Alex in her mind, wondering if she had made the right choice, if there had been a better way to handle it. But then she would remind herself. There had been no better way. The truth was, her marriage had been broken for longer than she had cared to admit. Daniel continued to reach out, his messages gentle but persistent. He understood her need for space, but he was there when she needed him, never pushing, always offering the quiet comfort of someone who didn't demand answers, only presence. But despite the warmth Daniel offered, there were times when Emma felt a deep loneliness that no amount of support could fill. She missed Alex's familiarity, their old rhythm. She missed the life they had built together, even if it was built on unstable ground. The regret she felt wasn't just for what had been lost. It was for the life she might never have again. Chapter 78. Unexpected Encounters. One afternoon, as Emma was browsing through a small bookstore in her new neighborhood, she ran into someone she hadn't expected to see. Sarah, an old friend from her past. They hadn't spoken in months, not since before everything had fallen apart. Sarah, with her warm, knowing smile, was a reminder of a simpler time, a time before the complexities of betrayal and heartbreak had tainted Emma's world. The sight of her stirred something in Emma, a yearning for connection, for someone who hadn't been a part of the storm that had torn through her life. "Emma," Sarah greeted, her voice soft with concern. "I wasn't sure if I'd see you here." Emma smiled faintly. "I've been trying to get out more, get back into things. You know, find some peace." "I understand," Sarah said, her eyes searching Emma's face. "I know things have been rough for you. If you ever need someone to talk to—" Emma swallowed hard, feeling the rawness of the past few weeks surge up again. "I don't know where to begin," she admitted. "I thought I had it figured out, but it's not that simple." Sarah finished for her. Emma nodded, grateful for the understanding. "Exactly. It feels like there are pieces of me I don't even recognize anymore. It's like I'm trying to put things back together, but I don't know where the pieces go." "I'm sure you'll figure it out," Sarah said, her voice steady. "But just know you don't have to do it alone." Emma's throat tightened. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that, how much she longed for reassurance. She had been so wrapped up in her own doubts and fears that she had forgotten there were people in her life who still cared, people who could help her through this, even if they didn't have all the answers. "I don't know if I can ever go back to who I was," Emma confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe you don't need to," Sarah said gently. "Maybe who you become will be even stronger." Chapter 79. The turning point. As the months went by, Emma's life slowly began to take shape again, though it was a shape she hadn't anticipated. She started working part-time at a small cafe in her neighborhood, something that kept her busy, but didn't overwhelm her. She began meeting people, forming new friendships, and even considering what her future could look like beyond the shadow of her past. But the unresolved tension between her and Alex continued to linger. They hadn't spoken much since their last confrontation, only exchanging brief messages about their shared responsibilities. Every time Emma saw his name on her phone, she felt a jolt of guilt. Yet she knew she couldn't face him until she had fully made peace with her decision. One evening, as she was walking home from work, she found herself standing outside the apartment they had once shared. The lights were dim, but she could still picture the life they had lived there, the love they had built. And then, out of nowhere, Alex appeared. He was walking toward her, his face etched with exhaustion. But when he saw her, his expression softened, as if the weight of everything that had transpired between them hung heavy in the air. "Emma," he said, his voice raw. "I didn't know if I'd see you again." "I didn't know if I was ready," Emma replied, her heart pounding in her chest. "But I'm here now." They stood there for a long moment, neither one knowing exactly what to say. Finally, Alex spoke again, his voice quiet but firm. "I don't expect anything from you, Emma. I wanted you to know that I've been trying to change.